Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Great Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Praise be to Goddess. Well, here it is, another Wednesday, and I have a big trip tomorrow. I'm visiting another college, and I'm going to see if I like their program and see if I want to go to school there. But I'm thinking at this point, even though I'm going there, that I probably won't go there to school there. I've sort of changed my mind. I'm hovering on the edge of changing my mind about which profession I want to go into. And I'm thinking I'm going to maybe go into business school, business like business management, or either business management or one of these others like accounting, one of those. So I may not become a stenographer after all, but it all depends on the next couple of days and how it goes. Next couple of days I'm going to be visiting another college, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll see if I like it, and then I'll decide. But I really don't think I'm going to become a stenographer at this point, because it won't give me the background that I need and the education that I want and that I prefer. So, today's subject is, do gods and goddesses really exist? Do they exist? Is there such a thing as gods and goddesses and so many people worship, and do they exist? Well, the answer is yes, they do exist, but they are not gods and goddesses. They are actually angels. Are they good and bad? Depends on the angel. It depends on the god or goddess. If they're good gods and goddesses, then they're definitely good angels. If they're evil gods and goddesses, then their level of evil depends on what they did that was evil and what they did that was wrong, according to the mythology. And whether they're good or bad just depends on the mythology. Now, how do I know this? How do I know that these gods and goddesses are really angels and that they really exist? Well, the reason I know is for two reasons. One, we know that goddess is one, because it makes sense that the universe had a single cause, a single source. It makes sense. If there were other sources or other causes of the universe that were outside of the universe, then they would be applied to different universes, but not our universe, okay? So it makes sense for the universe to have one source, and I believe that source is goddess, because the divine feminine is manifest throughout our world and throughout the universe. We see examples of the divine feminine here on earth. So it makes sense that the one source was the divine feminine. And the other thing that I believe that makes me believe in these gods and goddesses is that the goddess is infinitely creative. And how do we know the goddess is infinitely creative? Well, science tells us so. The science says that the universe is so vast. The universe is so vast, and it's so big, and there's so much in that universe, that anything we can conceive of, anything we can possibly think of, anything that we can imagine up in our heads, even Star Trek characters like that, like Spock and that guy with the curly ears and the flat head with no hair, that guy, they're real. All of them. All the characters in all of our stories in the Marvel universe have a resemblance to real people, real or imagined, in other parts of the universe. Even if they have no resemblance to people on Earth, they may resemble people in other parts of the universe. And there could be humans in other parts of the universe as well. So it's really true. The universe is so vast, and there's so much variation in that universe, and there's so many people in that universe that they must exist somewhere. Okay? They must exist somewhere because the universe is so vast that it contains all the possibilities. That is what science tells us. The science is clear on this. Now, life is exceedingly rare. How many planets are there with life? Not very many. How many planets are there with life and humans? Even fewer. But the universe is so vast and it's so complex that these people must exist somewhere, just the way they are in the characters in our stories. So the gods and goddesses must exist. They must exist somewhere in our universe, and they must have superpowers. But they are not gods and goddesses in their own right, because there's only one goddess, and that's Goddess, and she's God also. So there's one goddess, and that's Goddess. So, and for those of you that believe in God, that's fine. That's fine. You can believe that there's one God. That's fine. But the main thing to take away from this is that there's one source. There's one source, and that's our Goddess. And so the universe is vast. It's vast. It contains all the possibilities. So what is the nature of these gods and goddesses that human beings have imagined or conceived of, or maybe even made psychic contact with, so that they know what they're like? Where do they live? What are they like? Are any of them fallen angels? Are any of them like us? Are they human? Are they alive in the flesh, or are they alive in spirit? Do they exist in paradise or on Earth, or on one of the other planets in this universe? What are they like? Well, these questions are hard to answer because we don't really know where these gods and goddesses are. But and seeing as how they're angels, they can either exist in paradise or on one of the planets, okay, including Earth is a possibility. Now, some of these gods and goddesses, people believe they really came to Earth as human, like Vishnu. Vishnu's the big one. He had 2 human incarnations, Vishnu did. One of his human incarnations, he was Rama, and the other human incarnation, he was Krishna, and they believe that he had several human incarnations. So, but those are the best known, those 2, Rama and Krishna. And they even believe he was a monkey god at one point. So they believe a lot about these, about their gods and goddesses. Some of them have been human before, so they would have had to have existed on Earth. And so some of them have been on Earth as human. But most of them, the majority of them, we don't see anyone who really resembles them on Earth that could have been their human incarnation. So they probably, if they're good, if they're basically good, and they don't have any negative or evil traits, they're probably in paradise as enlightened angels in the presence of Goddess. And if they have bad or negative traits, then they were probably human. Because humans with bad or negative traits, or who do bad things, wind up on Earth. Okay? That's where the vast majority of fallen angels wind up, is on Earth. Now, if they were exceptionally bad, like the Asuras, and Asuras are part of Hinduism, the Asuras are very negative, very evil, that do very wicked deeds and kill lots of people, then they might They might wind up in one of many hells, but we are not convinced. We're not convinced that they wound up in hell. They might have been on Earth as humans. And if they weren't on Earth as human beings, they might be on one of the other planets as a life form, as physical life forms. So that's the answer. That's the long or the short answer, depending on your point of view. And so they must exist. They do exist. And let's face it, they're people's heroes. People take these gods and goddesses as their heroes. Now, for example, Zeus was a rapist, and he subjugated Goddess. So he would be a human incarnation. He's probably human, or else on one of the other planets as a human-like being. So Zeus is not one of the, he's not in paradise as far as I can tell. I don't think Zeus is in paradise. They say his home is on Mount Olympus, but there's nothing alive up on Mount Olympus. So it's doubtful that he came from Mount Olympus like the myth says. But if he did exist, he was probably human or modeled upon a human. His name might not have been Zeus. That might be his spiritual name. But as far as Zeus goes, he's not one of the enlightened beings, so he wouldn't be on he would be on one of the planets. He wouldn't be in paradise. And he wouldn't be subjugating Goddess, because he really doesn't have the power to subjugate Goddess. And his wife Hera was probably human with him. So that's the answer to that question. Now, what are their powers? Are they superpowered? Maybe. They might be very powerful angels or very powerful beings. And they might have superhuman powers or superhuman strength that we can't really compare with, like Thor. Thor is a very powerful spirit and is very strong physically and mentally. And so people like Thor would be superhuman, but they're not more powerful than Goddess. Compared to Goddess, all of her children are very small, and all of her human children are very small. Goddess is vast. Okay, she's huge. The whole universe is just the size of a baby to her. So she's vast and she's huge, and she created everything, all these trillions of souls out of her own essential matter. So she is vast. And that's how we know she's vast, because she created all the beings out of her essential matter, which means that she had to have a lot of essential matter. So the Goddess is vast compared to Earth and compared to human beings. We know that all of her children, no matter how big they are and how powerful they are, even if they're the most powerful of all the angels, are still very small compared to her. And in fact, all the gods and goddesses, because they're very human in appearance and in nature, because they're human in appearance and nature, they're probably higher intelligences, but they're like human beings. They're probably very close to human. Even if they're superhuman, they're close to human, and they're not going to be like the white tiger. They're not going to be super powerful angels, okay? They're not going to be super powerful angels like the white tiger. They're not going to be universe-size gods and goddesses. These gods and goddesses are going to be much smaller, like humans. So we know that these gods and goddesses, despite being very virtuous, some of them, it's despite being very virtuous and despite living in paradise and Goddess's presence, they're very minuscule, and they're human-like. They're very human-like. And even if they're not from Earth, or if they lived on Earth once or twice or a few times, they're human-like, but they're maybe not human, but they're very human-like, so they're smaller. They're bigger than the average human, not physically but spiritually is what I'm talking about. They might be bigger than the average human and have superhuman abilities, but they're not galaxy size. They're not galaxy wide angels. So they're not that big. Okay, so they're not like white tiger that covers a whole galaxy. They're not that powerful. So what can we take away from the story of the gods and goddesses? Well, some people really believe in them and think that they deserve their worship, and they worship them in various ways. Others don't worship them but believe in them, and that's probably where I'm at, where I don't worship them but I believe in them, but I don't believe they're gods and goddesses. I don't think they're worthy of my worship. And then some people don't believe in them. They think that they couldn't possibly exist, just like they don't think God or goddess exists, like atheists. And sometimes other religions like Christians and Muslims who don't believe in anything except one God, and don't believe in other gods and goddesses other than their God. So that's the three different categories of people: the ones who worship the gods and goddesses, the ones that believe in the gods and goddesses, and the ones who don't believe in the gods and goddesses. So that's the three categories of people. And of these three categories of people, I'm probably in the group that believes in them, but doesn't think that they're worthy of worship, and doesn't worship them. So as far as God or goddess goes, it's just a name. It's just a name that we give somebody, right? Like, you're a god or you're a goddess, right? But what really makes a person a god or a goddess, right? It's superhumanness, superpowers. So superpowers, very powerful, worthiness of worship, a state of incorruptibility, depending upon a person's perspective of what incorruptibility is, because obviously the Greeks did not have a very high concept of corruptibility at all. Whereas, well, that was the ancient Greeks. Nowadays they're more stringent in Greece. But the Hindus have a very stringent belief that their gods and goddesses are virtuous. So it depends on the culture, whether or not we believe that a certain spirit is corruptible or incorruptible. So those are the three criteria for being a god or goddess: the incorruptibility, the superpowers, and the worthiness of worship. And the only one who meets all those criteria is the ultimate. Whoever our creator is the only one worthy of our worship. And the Buddhists believe that there's creators of beings that are gods and goddesses. And then they believe that on the higher level are beings that have control over the creations of others, which is very odd. It's very odd to think that anyone could have control over the creations of others when they didn't create those beings. But that's what they believe. The Buddhists believe this. And I don't agree. I agree that whoever created us would have the power over us. And I think that's goddess because I believe it's one source. Now, that would sort of technically make me a monotheist, but not like the traditional monotheists, because the traditional monotheists believe in a specific God that's their God. And they call him by various names: Allah, Yahweh, Jesus. But they have different names, but it's basically from the same source. It's the Judaism. So because their God comes from the same source, they all believe in the same God. Whereas that's traditional monotheism. I do not believe in their God. I believe in goddess. So that makes me a little bit different. And I have different beliefs about goddess. Like, for example, traditional monotheism, they shun all sexuality. Sexuality is evil, it's bad. People who have sex are punished, and they go to hell, and they're killed. and they deserve to be put to death. And I don't believe that. Goddess, obviously rape is bad, and the monotheistic religions don't criticize rape as much as they do, for example, incest. But I would criticize incest and rape, but I don't think that people should be put to death. And so, but Goddess is a sexual being, and she did create sex. So she has sexual characteristics, and that would be considered verboten, evil, bad to think of a god or anyone who's a creator or worthy of worship of being a sexual being or having sexual characteristics. Whereas I don't believe that. I don't believe that way. Goddess can be sexual. She can be quite sexy if she wants to be. And she's free to be as sexy as she wants. She can be as sexy as you can possibly imagine her being sexy, because she created sex, and it makes sense that she would be a sexual being and very sexy. And so some people have hang-ups about sex, and they get hung up on that, and it blocks their ability to believe in a all-powerful goddess. But it's not a hang-up for me, so it doesn't interfere with my belief in Goddess. Like a good example, recently a friend of mine, Judy, said that she looked up Lalita Devi on my recommendation, and she saw a whole bunch of stuff about sex related to the Lalita Devi. She said this guy named Shiva, that's her. One of the gods that worships her is attracted to her, and she can't possibly be the goddess that I conceive of, because she's too sexy. They mentioned breasts and thighs and so on. It was religious work, and she got hung up on it. She got hung up on the fact that the goddess was too sexy, and it isn't a hang up for me. Shiva is the consort of Lalita, who is also Shakti, and so they're like husband and wife. So it's not illicit sex like she imagined. She imagined it was illicit because she heard that Shiva was really attracted to her, and that got her really upset. And it's not illicit because she's his consort. But I don't believe in Shiva. As far as being Goddess's mate, I don't believe that Shiva is Goddess's mate. He may be an enlightened being who's in her presence and is attracted to her, but he's not her consort. He's not her mate. He's not Goddess's mate. Now he could be in a state where he's drunk on Goddess's essence and in her presence all the time, and is in love with her and very, very enamored of her. But that doesn't mean that he is Goddess's personal consort. Okay, he's not her husband. And so it's just something to think about. The goddess's sexuality is a tricky subject. A lot of people object to it. Like Sri Ramakrishna believed that it would be better to be the goddess's child rather than her mate or her consort, because if you got into the sexual realm, that was dangerous. Okay, that was danger zone. Like you could get into some trouble or get into some danger if you. Now, I don't believe that. I don't believe that being in love with Goddess or desiring to be her mate is necessarily danger zone or dangerous or I mean, there's a potential for abuse and corruption there, but it's not dangerous personally. It's to you. You're not in any physical danger from Goddess if you are in love with her. So Goddess's sexuality is another tricky subject. Maybe I'll discuss that more in another video, but the takeaway from here is that the gods and goddesses are angels, like, for example, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, Lakshmi, Sarasvati, Parvati. They're all angels, and they all exist because the goddess's creativity is vast. Her universe is vast, and they can be encompassed by that universe. The universe can accommodate these souls, so they must exist somewhere, and they could have superpowers, just like we imagine. They might even have the same names. They might be called by these names, but they're not all powerful, and they're like our brothers and sisters, so they're not worthy of worship. We're all children of Goddess. All of us are children of Goddess, no exceptions. So if we're all children of Goddess, why would we worship another child of Goddess? It doesn't make sense. That's just my belief, my takeaway. You may believe differently. You may believe that in something different, and that's your freedom. You're free to choose who to worship and what to worship, and what you believe and what you don't believe. But that's my perspective, just for my 2 cents, just for you to think about. Just something to think about. Not making a decision right away, not snapping to judgment, but just something to think about for a while, and decide for yourself whether you believe in one goddess or many goddesses, and what the nature of those gods and goddesses is. I'm Sarah Jane Alphawolf, signing off. Wish me luck on my journey to the college, to see what it's like, and I'll see you next time.